Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another fantastic episode of Captain Patriotic. I hope you're doing alright. I don't know about you, but I had a wonderful Thanksgiving with my friends and family, and I hope you did too. There's nothing like sitting around a big table with a bunch of really tasty food and catching up with friends and family that you normally don't see. And I hope your Thanksgiving was as well as mine was. I also want to thank everyone for your support with my World War I Most Decorated series. Thank you guys for watching and supporting the channel through all of this, and I am excited to bring you more content like this. So today, I have the honor of kickstarting another Most Decorated Veterans series. And this time, we are shifting our focus from the First World War to World War II, perhaps the most significantly and historical important war in recorded history. Now, I know everybody has heard tons and tons about World War II, whether it's from simple history lessons in history class in school, to relatives who have actually served during that conflict. World War II is just a very complex and also very significant war in our nation's history as well as other nations around the world. Literally, there was 60 million people, both in armed conflict as well as civilians and soldiers and what have you, that would perish during World War II when it lasted from September of 1939 until well toward the end of 1945. So in honor of all of our living as well as now deceased World War II veterans, I have the privilege today of introducing and talking about the most decorated U.S. Army soldier to serve during World War II. And guys, that particular honor goes to none other than Audie Leon Murphy. And not only is he considered the most decorated U.S. Army soldier of World War II, but in general, he's considered one of the most decorated American combat veterans of World War II because he received every military combat award for valor that was available from the U.S. Army during the 1940s, as well as French and Belgian awards for heroism in battle. Now, I want to pause for a moment before we dive more into Audie Murphy's story. You know how I was saying, and everyone else has said before, that World War II basically shaped the way that wars are fought today? While it is true that World War I technically was the first modern war, World War II was significant for bringing us many inventions like radar, the Enigma machine that was used to crack German codes over enemy lines and even at sea. But World War II is also significant, particularly in the United States, because not only did World War II pull us directly out of the Great Depression of 1929 through the early 40s, but it also modernized a lot of our military that we know of today. World War II basically modernized, at least for the most part, all of the military medals that are awarded to each branch of the U.S. military. Now, it is true that the most prominent and significant military medals for the United States was actually established during World War I, which includes the Congressional Medal of Honor, which was around since the American Civil War. Then the second highest military medal for valor, the Service Crosses, like the Distinguished Service Cross for the Army, the Navy Cross for the Navy and the Marine Corps, and later on the Air Force Cross, was actually established during World War I. And then the Silver Star was officially established during World War I as the third highest military honor for any veteran from World War I. Those three medals still carried on over into not only World War II, but are still around to this very day. But World War II introduced a series of lesser significant medals to go along with those main three. Now, the first example of a medal that was introduced during World War II and has since then been awarded into the modern day is the Bronze Star, which is technically the fourth highest military medal for valor in combat, right before the Silver Star and just after the Purple Heart. And this particular medal is awarded for either heroic achievement, heroic service, meritorious achievement, or meritorious service in a combat zone. Now, another medal that debuted during World War II was something called the Legion of Merit. Now, this medal is awarded for exceptional meritorious conduct in the performance of outstanding services and achievements. It's kind of awarded for someone that served in kind of sort of a leadership role during a combat zone or directly related to a combat zone. That's the second example. Another example of a medal that became more prominent during World War II was the Distinguished Service Medals for each military branch. Now, this is cheating a little bit because technically the Distinguished Service Medals were established during World War I, where they have one version for the U.S. Army and the other for the Navy, which at that time incorporated the Navy, Coast Guard, and the Marine Corps. This medal is typically awarded to individuals who distinguish themselves by exceptionally meritorious service to the government in a duty of great responsibility. In other words, it's more or less a behind-the-scenes and a lot of times not combat-related medal, like you don't have to earn it during combat necessarily, but this medal is also awarded because whatever that individual did, like planning a battle or an operation, was still considered critical to the success of a mission during wartime. And oftentimes, this particular medal is awarded to higher-ups in the military that serve some kind of leadership role, or there's some kind of bigwig, as you might think of them as. So, in addition to the Distinguished Service Medals, there was also a couple of decorations between the World Wars to recognize U.S. military pilots, or pilots in general, for achievements in flight, sometimes during combat. Those particular medals include the Distinguished Flying Cross, as well as the Air Medal. The Distinguished Flying Cross was established in the mid-1920s, and it has since then been awarded to anyone who, after April 6, 1917, distinguished themselves by single acts of heroism or extraordinary achievement while participating in an aerial flight. Fun fact for you, one of the first recipients of the Distinguished Flying Cross was none other than Charles Lindbergh for his non-stop flight around the world. That would be something significant to warrant the Distinguished Flying Cross. And then, of course, in the military, it would be for going above the call of duty during a dogfight or something. That's where a Distinguished Flying Cross is typically awarded for. Now, the lesser medal that is under the Distinguished Flying Cross is the Air Medal, which is typically awarded for single acts of heroism or meritorious achievement while participating in an aerial flight, such to the degree that it is not qualified for or as significant as the Distinguished Flying Cross. Anyway, guys, that was just a little trivia and a little context for the different medals that I'm going to be talking about from here on out, not only with World War II, but the later conflicts as well. I just wanted to give you a little backstory to kind of follow me as I talk about them. Anyway, let's get back to Audie Murphy. Murphy actually received the Medal of Honor for Valor when he was 19 for single-handedly holding off a company of German soldiers for an hour at the Colmar Pocket in France during January of 1945. After that, he led a successful counterattack while being wounded and practically out of ammunition from all of his guns. That's pretty gutsy, if you might say the least. Let's back up a little bit, and our story begins on June 20th, 1925, when Audie Leon Murphy was born into a large family of sharecroppers in Hunt County, Texas. As the story goes, his father abandoned Murphy and his siblings, and their mother died whenever Audie was a teenager. Murphy left school in the 5th grade to pick cotton and find other work to help support his family during the Great Depression. In fact, his skill with a hunting rifle helped feed his family through these harsh times. So he does this for a few years, all the way through basically elementary school age, all the way through high school when he's a teenager. Now, fast forward a little bit to 1941. It was after the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, when Murphy's older sister helped him to falsify documentation about his birth date in order to meet the minimum age requirements for enlisting in the U.S. military. Just like a lot of boys at this time, he had family members that served during World War I and other conflicts, and just hearing those stories basically enticed him to enlist in the military whenever he came of age, and that was exactly the case with Murphy. However, Audie had a difficult time originally trying to enlist in the military because he was turned down initially for being underweight by not only the U.S. Army, but also the U.S. Navy and lastly the U.S. Marine Corps. So after he tries to enlist basically the end of 1941, the beginning of 1942, his dreams basically demolished before his eyes, and he didn't think he was going to be able to go into the military. Basically, what he does after this is he tries to make himself gain enough weight so that he can enlist in the military, and he did this through various methods. He did this for almost 6 months or what have you. So after this little debacle and trying to gain weight, he was eventually accepted by the U.S. Army on June 30th, 1942, where he would go to basic training and all this to basically get ready to go fight in Europe. Now, initially, Murphy was shipped to Casablanca in French Morocco on February 20th, 1943, where he ended up being assigned to B Company, 1st Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment of the 3rd Infantry Division, which trained at that time under the command of Major General Lucan Truscott, where Murphy participated as a platoon messenger with his division at Ersoux in Algeria in rigorous training for the Allied assault landings at Sicily. He was officially promoted to private first class on May 7th, 1943, and then on to corporal on July 15th, 1943. So when the 3rd Infantry Division landed at Licata, Sicily on July 10th, Murphy was a division messenger runner, just like he was during his training, and on a scouting patrol, he killed 2 fleeing Italian officers. Although he was in combat now, he was sidelined with illness for a week whenever Company B arrived in Palermo, Italy on July 20th, 1943. Now, he eventually rejoined them when they were assigned to a hillside location protecting a machine gun emplacement, while the rest of the 3rd Infantry Division fought at San Fratello en route to the Allied capture of the transit port located at Messina. Fast forward a little bit, and Murphy participated in the September 1943 mainland Salerno landing at Paglia. I'll put the pronunciation in the video for you. While on a scouting patrol along the Volturno River, he and 2 other soldiers were ambushed, where machine gun fire killed one of the soldiers. Murphy and the other survivor responded by killing 5 Germans with hand grenades and machine gun fire. While taking part in the October Allied assault on the Volturno line, he and his company repelled an attack by 7 German soldiers, killing 3 and taking the other 4 prisoners. After all of this, Audie was officially promoted to sergeant on December 13th, 1943, for fighting in Italy. Then another month later, in January 1944, Murphy was promoted to staff sergeant. After this, he was actually hospitalized in Naples, Italy with malaria on January 21st, 1944, and was unable to participate in the initial landing at the Anzo beachhead. Now, he did return a week later and participated in the First Battle of Cisterna, where he was made a platoon sergeant in Company B following that battle. He returned with the 3rd Division to Anzio, where they remained there for 4 months. While taking shelter from the weather in an abandoned farmhouse on March 2nd, 1944, Murphy and his platoon killed the crew of a passing German tank. Murphy then continues to crawl out alone close enough to destroy the tank with his rifle grenades. It was for this particular action which he received a Bronze Star with a V device. This, my friends, is his first of many decorations that he would receive for his service in the Army. After this, Murphy continued to make scouting patrols to take German prisoners before being hospitalized again for a week on March 13th, 1944, with a second bout of malaria. Now, 61 infantry officers and enlisted men of Company B, 15th Infantry, including Murphy, were awarded the Combat Infantry Badge on May 8th, 1944, which basically means that they are experienced combat infantrymen at this point during all this fighting in Italy. Now, fast forward to later on that day, Murphy was awarded his second Bronze Star medal for bravery in combat against both Italian and German forces. Now, from there, a month later, on June 4th, 1944, American forces officially liberated Rome, and Murphy basically remained in Rome with his platoon throughout July of 1944. By July 1944, the United States had practically overran all of the Italian forces, which, as we know, were allied with the Germans during World War II, and they completely took over the Italian peninsula and had it under Allied control by the middle of 1944. During all of this, Audie is already a semi-decorated veteran himself with 2 Bronze Stars. That's still pretty significant, especially if you would imagine all the fighting during World War II. That was pretty significant. Well, fast forward a little bit to August of 1944, and it was during the first wave of the Allied invasion of southern France, Operation Dragon, I think it's called. Murphy received the Distinguished Service Cross for actions taken on August 15th, 1944. Now, according to records and his commanding officers and other people that he served with, the story goes that after landing on Yellow Beach near, sorry for mispronouncing this, Ramatuelle, France, Murphy's platoon was making its way through a vineyard when the men were attacked by German soldiers. Leaving his men in a covered position, Murphy dashed 40 yards through withered fire to a draw. Using this route, he went back toward the beaches, found a light machine gun squad, and returning up the rocky hill, placed the machine gun in position 75 yards in advance of his platoon. In the duel which ensued, Lieutenant Murphy silenced the enemy machine gun, killed 2 of the crew, and wounded a 3rd. As Murphy silenced the enemy gun, he proceeded further up the draw where 2 Germans advanced toward him. Quickly destroying both of them, he dashed up the draw alone toward the enemy stronghold, disregarding bullets which glanced off the rocks around him and hand grenades which exploded a mere 15 yards away. Closing in, he wounded 2 Germans with his carbine and killed 2 more in a fierce, brief firefight, and forced the remaining 5 Germans to surrender. His extraordinary heroism resulted ultimately in the capture of a fiercely contested enemy-held hill and the annihilation or capture of the entire enemy garrison on that hill. Staff Sergeant Murphy's intrepid actions, personal bravery, and zealous devotion to duty exemplified the highest traditions of the military forces of the United States. So, in conclusion, his actions that day resulted in him killing 6, wounding 2, and taking another 11 Germans prisoner. That's pretty dang impressive, and to be awarded the 2nd highest military honor for that, that's more than well deserved in my book, for sure. God dang, you would think he was on drugs or something doing what all he did. That's pretty freaking crazy. This is really, really cool. So Murphy, with the 1st Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment during August 27th and 28th, 1944, they participated in an offensive at Montélimar, which secured that area from the Germans and ultimately made the Allies have more of a step-hold or grasp into German territory. Him, along with the other soldiers who took part in this action, received a Presidential Unit Citation. Murphy's first Purple Heart was awarded for a heel wound that he received in a mortar shell blast on September 15th, 1944, in northeastern France. He earned his first Silver Star Medal on October 2nd, 1944, at the Leomet Quarry in the Clear River Valley, whenever he inched his way over rugged, uneven terrain toward an enemy machine gun which had surprised a group of officers that were on reconnaissance. Getting to within 15 yards of the German gun, First Lieutenant Murphy stood up and, with disregard a burst of enemy fire, delivered at such close range in which miraculously missed him, flung 2 hand grenades into the machine gun position, killing 4 Germans and wounding 3 more, while ultimately destroying the position altogether. 3 days later, in Le Thouley, France, Murphy once again crawled alone 50 yards toward the Germans, carrying a radio with him while under severe enemy machine gun and rifle fire, to a point 200 yards roughly from a strongly entrenched enemy force, which had prevented his platoon's further advance into the territory. Once again, with complete disregard to his own safety, he directed his men for an hour while the Germans fired directly at him. When his men finally took the hill, 15 Germans had been killed and another 35 wounded. Murphy's actions on this day earned him his second Silver Star Medal, and because of this, he was awarded a battlefield commission to second lieutenant on October 14th, 1944, which ultimately elevated him to platoon leader. Fast forward a little bit to October 26, 1944, and it was while en route to, forgive me for this, Beauvillars, France. The 3rd Battalion of Company B was attacked by a German sniper group. Murphy captured 2 Germans before being shot in the hip by a sniper. He ultimately reacted by returning fire and shooting the sniper directly between the eyes. I can't make this stuff up. That's pretty badass. I mean, just to blindly fire and to take out a sniper like that, that's pretty cool. At the 3rd General Hospital at Aix-en-Provence, the removal of gangrene from the wound caused partial loss of his hip muscle, which kept him out of combat until January 1945. For this wound, Murphy received another Purple Heart for this significant injury. So, by the end of 1944, he is more or less a combat-hardened Army veteran and has seen a lot of stuff and a lot of action. I could only imagine half the stuff that this guy has seen, but hey, he doesn't care. He goes into the thick of a fight in the heat of battle and he just kicks ass and takes names. I can't think of too many people that would do that to this day. That is ballsy and courageous and wonderful, to say the least. So, to give you a little backstory to the next significant battle that Audie Murphy participated in, the battle for which he would earn his highest military honor was located in the Colmar Pocket, which is about 850 square miles in the Vosges Mountains up in France, almost into Germany. And this particular pocket had been held by German forces since November of 1944, during the time that Murphy is still recuperating in the hospital. On January 14th, 1945, Murphy officially returned to his platoon. He moved with the 3rd Division on January 24th, 1945, to the little town of Holzwar, where they faced a strong German counterattack. He was once again wounded in both legs, for which he received a third Purple Heart. As the company awaited reinforcements on January 26th, he was made commander of Company B. So it was on this same day that Audie Murphy would be awarded the nation's highest military medal, the Congressional Medal of Honor. And it is a really, really bold and courageous tale, but here it goes. During this battle, the Germans scored a direct hit on an M10 tank destroyer, a U.S. tank destroyer, setting it alight and forcing the crew to ultimately abandon this tank destroyer. Murphy, while all this was going on, ordered his men to retreat to positions in the woods, where he remained alone at his post, shooting his M1 carbine and directing artillery fire via his field radio, while the Germans aimed fire directly at his position. Pretty much, he's out here in the open, no cover besides this tank or whatever. He ain't got anywhere else to go, but he doesn't care. He's just going to direct fire as it is. Murphy, in turn, mounted the abandoned burning tank destroyer and began firing its .50 caliber machine gun at all of those advancing Germans that were closing in on his position, which ultimately resulted in killing a squad crawling through a ditch towards him. For a solid hour, Murphy stood on top of this flaming tank destroyer, returning German fire from foot soldiers and other advancing tanks, ultimately resulting in the killing or wounding of 50 Germans. 50 Germans. That is insane. Jesus, that's crazy. While he was participating in this big, long firefight, he ultimately sustained a leg wound during this fight and stopped only after he ran out of ammunition on top of that flaming tank. Murphy then rejoined his men. In disregard for his own injury, he led them back to repel the remaining Germans that he hadn't killed himself. In fact, he insisted on remaining with his men while his wounds were being treated there in the thick of the battle. And rightfully so, for all of these actions on that day, he was awarded the Medal of Honor. And in addition to the Medal of Honor, the 3rd Infantry Division as a whole was also awarded another Presidential Unit Citation for its actions at the Colmar Pocket, which basically brings his total to either 2 or 3 Presidential Unit Citations for Murphy himself. Fast forward to February 16th, 1945, and Murphy was promoted to First Lieutenant and awarded the Legion of Merit for his service in various leadership roles in both Italy and France as platoon sergeant, platoon leader, and company commander of Company B, 15th Infantry, the 3rd Infantry Division, from January 22nd, 1944 until February 18th, 1945. After all of this, he was ultimately moved from the front lines to a regimental headquarters and made a liaison U.S. Army officer for the remaining part of the war in Europe, until it ends, of course, in May of 1945. This is such an eye-opening experience and such an inspiring story from a very young man who wanted to serve his country and give it his all to king and country, and for the men and women and children that were living back home during all of this. And like I've stated before, because of all of these heroic actions, Murphy was awarded every possible U.S. Army medal for serving in combat. He didn't win all the medals that the Army offers, but he was awarded all the ones for valor in combat, to say the very least, which is an astounding achievement by anyone. And to think that he became a Medal of Honor recipient by the time he was 19 years old. That is unheard of, guys. That is really impressive. And I want to say that he was one of the youngest Medal of Honor recipients during World War II. That is, wow. I'm just taken back by all the stuff that he did during his time in the Army. So, in a semi-brief summary, I'll give you a list of all of the medals that Audie Murphy received during his time in the Army. First of all, we know that he was awarded the Medal of Honor, but then he was also awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, a Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts. Those are all of the personal medals that he received for valor. As far as individual military unit awards go, he was awarded 2 Presidential Unit Citations along with the other soldiers that he served with in Italy and France. And then, as far as his regular military service and campaign medals are concerned, he was awarded the Army Good Conduct Medal, the American Campaign Medal, the European, African, Middle Eastern Campaign Medal, with 9 campaign stars. 9 campaign stars, because he was pretty much there from the beginning till the very end. He was also awarded the World War II Victory Medal, the Army of Occupation Medal for Germany, the Armed Forces Reserve Medal, a Combat Infantryman Badge, a Marksman Badge for rifles, and an Expert Badge with Bayonet Component Bar for knowing how to use a bayonet in combat. Now, these are all of the U.S. awards that he was awarded. His foreign medals that he was awarded include the French Legion of Honor with the grade of Chevalier or Knight, the French Croix de Guerre with Silver Star, the French Croix de Guerre with Palm, the Medal of a Liberated France, the Belgian Croix de Guerre with 1940 Palm, as well as the French Fourragre in colors of the Croix de Guerre, which is authorized by all of the veterans of the 3rd Infantry to wear who served and fought in France during World War II. So, after this impressive career in World War II, Murphy decides to stay in the Army the rest of his life. In fact, he actually transferred to the Texas National Guard Reserves. And while he's still in the reserves, he worked in Hollywood as an actor with over 40 films to his name. Unfortunately, his life was cut short on May 28, 1971, when Murphy was killed on a private plane whenever it crashed into the Brush Mountains near Catawba, Virginia, which is just 20 miles west of Roanoke, in really bad conditions. It was on June 7th, 1971, that Murphy was buried with full military honors in Arlington National Cemetery. In attendance at his memorial service was future President George H.W. Bush, as well as other future presidents during this time. His grave is the cemetery's second most visited grave, besides that of President John F. Kennedy. So, thank you guys for sticking around this long and hearing his life story. It's very, very impressive, to say the least. I can't believe he achieved half of the stuff that he did while he was in the service. That just blows my mind. But thank you guys for all the kind support and everything. And if you hadn't checked out any of my previous videos, please go watch them here. And please don't forget to like and subscribe for future content. Thank you all, and until next time, have a wonderful rest of your day.